A single mom, walking home after a long shift, footsteps behind her. She turns the corner, he's still there. No neighbors, no cars, no one around to help. When the stalker finally makes his move, she fights back in a way he never saw coming. But that was only the beginning, because the real nightmare doesn't end with one attack. The danger grows darker, the threats closer, and even her own community starts to turn against her. Her daughter's safety, her faith, and her future are on the line. She thought surviving one night was enough. But what happens when the stalker comes back? And this time, the stakes are higher than ever. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Rachel Owens stepped out of the bustling hospital into the quiet evening, her scrubs still carrying the sharp scent of disinfectant from her shift. The day had been long, 3 emergency cases and a mountain of paperwork, but thoughts of Emily's smile kept her going. Her daughter would be waiting at home with Mrs. Price Martinez, their elderly neighbor who watched Emily during Rachel's late shifts. "Good night, Rachel," called Sandra from reception, waving through the glass doors. Rachel waved back, pulling her light jacket closer, as a cool breeze swept through the parking lot. The sun had already set, leaving behind a deep purple sky dotted with early stars. She checked her watch, 8:45 p.m. If she hurried, she could still help Emily with her math homework before bedtime. The bus ride was quiet, just a handful of passengers heading home from their evening shifts. Rachel leaned her head against the cool window, watching the familiar streets of their suburban Georgia neighborhood slide past. The bus's gentle swaying nearly lulled her to sleep, but she forced herself to stay alert, counting the stops until hers. When the bus finally reached her stop, Rachel stepped out onto the sidewalk. The streets were eerily empty, the only sound coming from crickets chirping in nearby bushes. Most houses had their lights on, warm squares of yellow glowing in the darkness, but few people were outside at this hour. She started her usual walk home, her practical nursing shoes making soft scuffs against the concrete. The route was so familiar, she could walk it with her eyes closed, past the Johnson's house, with its perfectly trimmed hedges, around the corner by the old oak tree, then 3 blocks straight to her modest 2-story home. That's when she heard it. Footsteps behind her. At first, Rachel didn't think much of it. Other people took this route home too. She continued walking, her thoughts drifting to Emily's upcoming science fair project. But as she turned right at the oak tree, the footsteps turned too. Her heart picked up speed. Rachel glanced over her shoulder, trying to appear casual. In the dim street lighting, she could make out a man's figure about 30 feet behind her. He seemed to be matching her pace exactly. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself, picking up her pace slightly. The footsteps behind her quickened too. Rachel's hands began to shake as she fumbled in her purse for her phone. The screen's glow felt too bright in the darkness, like a beacon announcing her location. She tried to unlock it, but her trembling fingers kept missing the pattern. Another turn, and still the footsteps followed. They seemed closer now. The safe, familiar streets of her neighborhood suddenly felt hostile and strange. Every shadow could be hiding another threat. Every dark doorway looked menacing. Where were all the neighbors who usually sat on their porches in the evening? Why weren't there any cars passing by? Rachel's throat felt tight, her breath coming in short gasps. She thought of Emily waiting at home, probably sitting at the kitchen table with her textbook spread out, saving the hard math problems for when Mommy got home. The image of her daughter gave her a burst of energy, and she walked faster still. But the footsteps behind her quickened too, growing louder on the concrete. Rachel could hear the man's breathing now, steady and purposeful. Her own pulse thundered in her ears. 2 blocks to go. Just 2 blocks. She thought about running but worried it would only provoke him. The self-defense class she'd taken years ago, after Mark died and she'd felt so vulnerable, seemed like a distant memory now. What had the instructor said about being followed? Stay in well-lit areas. Make noise. Draw attention. But there was no one around to pay attention. 1 block left. Rachel's house was so close now she could see it, the blue shutters she'd painted herself last summer, Emily's bicycle leaning against the porch railing. The porch light was on, a beacon of safety that seemed miles away. Her keys. She needed to have her keys ready. Rachel dug through her purse with shaking hands, finally feeling the familiar metal ring. She pulled them out, nearly dropping them in her panic. The footsteps were even closer now, no longer trying to maintain a discreet distance. Rachel could hear the scuff of shoes against concrete, the rustle of clothing, the deliberate breathing of someone who had been stalking her all this way. Her front steps were just ahead. Rachel gripped her house key tightly, holding it between her fingers like she'd been taught. Just a few more steps. Almost there. That's when the man emerged from the shadows, moving with frightening speed toward her. In the yellow glow of her porch light, she caught a glimpse of dark clothes, a masked face, hands reaching out to grab her. Her heart nearly stopped. Every nightmare she'd had since becoming a widow, every fear she'd pushed down for Emily's sake, every worst-case scenario she'd imagined, they all crashed together in this terrible moment as the stranger closed the distance between them. Rachel's hands trembled as she fumbled with her house keys, nearly dropping them twice. The porch light cast weak yellow circles that barely reached the steps, leaving deep shadows where anything or anyone could hide. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. The quiet street stretched empty in both directions. No cars passed by. No neighbors walked their dogs or chatted on their porches like they usually did. Even the marshal's house next door, normally lit up like a Christmas tree, sat dark and silent. The stillness felt wrong, threatening. Footsteps crunched on gravel behind her. Closer now, too close. "Please," she whispered, fingers slipping on the keys again. The metal scraped against the lock but wouldn't slide in. A bead of sweat rolled down her temple despite the cool evening air. Inside, through the front window, she could see Emily curled up on the couch reading, completely unaware of the danger just outside. Mrs. Martinez must have dozed off in the armchair again. The sight of her daughter, so peaceful and vulnerable, sent a fresh wave of panic through Rachel's chest. The footsteps stopped. Right behind her. Time seemed to slow down as a shadow fell across her hands. Rachel's mind flashed back to the self-defense class she'd taken years ago, after Tom died. She'd only gone to a few sessions, thinking it was silly, a waste of time. Now those memories rushed back with crystal clarity. The man lunged forward, his arm reaching for her shoulder. Without conscious thought, Rachel's body moved. She dropped her center of gravity just like her instructor had shown her, pivoting on her right foot. The motion caught her attacker off guard. His momentum carried him forward as Rachel's hip came up under his weight. For a split second, she felt his body tense in surprise. Then, physics took over. Rachel's movement threw him off balance, sending him stumbling past her into the porch railing. The wood creaked under his weight. She didn't wait to see if he'd recover. Rachel snatched up her fallen keys, hands steadier now that adrenaline had taken over. This time, the key slid home smoothly. She wrenched the door open and dove inside, slamming it shut behind her. The deadbolt clicked into place just as a heavy thud shook the door. "Emily!" Rachel called out, her voice higher than normal. "Go to your room, sweetie, right now." Emily looked up from her book, blue eyes widening at her mother's tone. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Just go, baby. Please." Rachel fumbled with her phone, trying to unlock it with shaking fingers. Mrs. Martinez stirred in the armchair, blinking in confusion. Another impact rattled the door. Emily jumped, her book falling to the floor. "Mommy? Go!" Rachel's voice cracked as she finally managed to dial 911. She herded Emily toward the hallway with one hand while holding the phone to her ear with the other. 911, what's your emergency?" The operator's calm voice felt like a lifeline. There's someone trying to break in." Rachel struggled to keep her voice steady. "He followed me home from the bus stop. I'm at 1247 Maple Street. Please hurry. I have my daughter here." More thuds against the door. The frame creaked ominously. "Ma'am, officers are already on their way," the operator assured her. "Can you get to a secure room?" Rachel backed down the hallway, pulling Mrs. Martinez along with her other hand. The elderly woman had finally grasped the situation and moved surprisingly quickly. "Yes, we're heading to the back bedroom now. Please hurry." They found Emily, in Rachel's room, curled up small in the corner. The sound of breaking glass from the front of the house made them all jump. "He's breaking in," Rachel whispered into the phone, pulling Emily into her arms. Mrs. Martinez quietly closed and locked the bedroom door, then dragged a chair under the handle for good measure. "Officers are 2 minutes out," the operator said firmly. "Stay on the line with me. Is there anything in the room you can use to defend yourself if necessary?" Rachel looked around frantically, but before she could answer, the welcome sound of sirens cut through the night air. They grew louder quickly, accompanied by the flash of red and blue lights through the bedroom window. Running footsteps pounded through the house, then out the front door and down the street. Car doors slammed outside. Male voices shouted commands. "Mom?" Emily's voice quavered. "Is it over?" Rachel held her daughter closer, stroking her hair. "It's okay. Mommy's here." She kept her voice soft and soothing, even though her heart still raced. "The police are here now. We're safe." A knock at the front door made them all tense until a clear voice called out, "Police! Is anyone home?" "Yes," Rachel called back, her voice breaking with relief. "We're in the back bedroom." Mrs. Martinez moved the chair, and Rachel unlocked the door with trembling hands. 2 officers stood in the hallway, flashlights lowered. One spoke into his radio, while the other addressed Rachel. "Ma'am, are you and your family all right?" Rachel nodded, still holding Emily close. "Yes, we're okay. Did you catch him?" "We have officers pursuing him on foot," the policeman assured her. "Can you tell us what happened?" As Rachel recounted the events, Emily's grip on her waist gradually loosened. Mrs. Martinez sat heavily in the chair, making the sign of the cross and murmuring prayers in Spanish. Outside, more sirens approached. "You did exactly the right thing," the officer said when Rachel finished her story. "We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to make a formal statement. But for now, we'll have a car stationed outside your house all night." Rachel nodded, feeling the last of her adrenaline drain away, leaving her exhausted. Emily looked up at her with worried eyes. "Are you really okay, Mom?" Rachel managed a small smile, pulling her daughter close again. "It's okay, Mommy's here," she repeated softly, as much to reassure herself as Emily. "Everything's going to be okay." The sound of sirens filled the night air, mixing with the murmur of gathering neighbors and the crackle of police radios. But Rachel focused only on the solid warmth of her daughter in her arms, the steady beat of Emily's heart against her chest, and the knowledge that, at least for now, they were safe. Blue and red lights flashed through the living room windows, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Rachel sat on her worn beige couch, her hands still shaking slightly as she wrapped them around a mug of tea that one of the officers had kindly made for her. Emily nestled close against her side, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Trunks, tightly to her chest. "Ma'am, could you walk us through what happened one more time?" Officer Martinez asked gently. She was a petite woman with kind eyes, who had immediately put Rachel at ease with her calm demeanor. Rachel nodded, taking a deep breath. "I was walking home from the bus stop after my hospital shift. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid, but the footsteps behind me." She paused, instinctively pulling Emily closer. "They matched every turn I made." Emily looked up at her mother with wide brown eyes, hugging Mr. Trunks even tighter. Her small fingers twisted in the elephant's worn fabric, a habit she'd developed whenever she felt anxious. "Then what happened?" Officer Martinez prompted, her pen hovering over her notepad. "When I reached my front steps, he came out of the shadows." Rachel's voice wavered slightly. "He lunged at me, and I just reacted. Years ago, after Tom, my husband, passed away, I took some self-defense classes. I never thought I'd actually use what I learned, but something just clicked." Officer Chen, Martinez's partner, stood by the window, his broad shoulders blocking out some of the pulsing lights from outside. "You did exactly the right thing, Mrs. Owens. Your quick thinking probably saved your life." Through the window, Rachel could see other officers leading a handcuffed figure to their patrol car. The man's head was down, but something about his posture sent a chill down her spine. He didn't look defeated, he looked patient. "We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement," Officer Martinez said, closing her notepad. "But for tonight, try to get some rest. We'll have a patrol car drive by regularly to check on you." Emily suddenly sat up straighter. "The bad man can't come back, right?" Her voice was small but determined, trying to sound brave, even as her fingers trembled around Mr. Trunks's trunk. Officer Chen knelt down to Emily's eye level. "Your mom was very brave tonight, and we're going to make sure you're both safe. Sometimes the bravest people come in packages we don't expect, right?" Emily nodded, a hint of pride crossing her face as she looked up at Rachel. "You're my hero, Mommy," she whispered, wrapping her arms around Rachel's waist. Rachel felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes. In that moment, despite the lingering fear, she felt a flicker of victory. She had protected her daughter. She had fought back. Maybe she was stronger than she thought. After the officers left, Rachel double-checked every lock in the house, drawing all the curtains tight. She tucked Emily into bed, staying longer than usual to read an extra chapter of their current bedtime story. Even after Emily drifted off to sleep, Rachel sat there, watching the gentle rise and fall of her daughter's chest, Mr. Trunks safely tucked under one arm. Back in her own bedroom, Rachel changed into her comfortable flannel pajamas, the ones Tom had given her on their last Christmas together. The familiar soft fabric usually brought comfort, but tonight everything felt different, tainted somehow by the evening's events. She slipped under her covers, leaving the bedside lamp on. The house creaked and settled around her, everyday noises that had never bothered her before, suddenly seeming ominous. Her phone sat on the nightstand, and she found herself checking it every few minutes, as if expecting something. At 11:42 p.m., that something came. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Rachel's fingers trembled as she picked it up, the blue light harsh in the dim room. The headline made her stomach drop. "Local man released on bail pending trial in attempted assault case." The phone slipped from her fingers onto the bedspread. The flicker of victory she'd felt earlier guttered like a candle in the wind. She could hear Emily's soft breathing from the next room through the thin walls, and suddenly the house felt too big, too exposed, too vulnerable. Rachel reached for her phone again, her finger hovering over the call button for the police station. But what would she say? That she was scared? That the system that was supposed to protect her had just let her attacker walk free? That she needed someone to tell her what to do next? From Emily's room came the soft sound of her daughter turning over in her sleep, followed by a quiet murmur. "My hero, Mommy," Emily had said. Those words echoed in Rachel's mind now, a reminder of what was at stake, of why she couldn't let fear win. She set the phone back down on the nightstand, but she didn't turn off the lamp. Sometimes, she thought, it was okay to need a little light in the darkness. Rachel walked Emily to school the next morning, her eyes darting from side to side as they made their way down the quiet suburban streets. The morning sun cast long shadows across their path, and each one made Rachel's heart skip a beat. She held Emily's small hand tighter, scanning every parked car and alleyway they passed. "Mom, you're squeezing too hard," Emily said, wiggling her fingers. Rachel immediately loosened her grip. "I'm sorry, sweetie." She forced a smile, trying to hide her anxiety from her daughter. Emily's pink backpack bounced as she skipped along, her dark braids swinging back and forth, completely unaware of her mother's inner turmoil. Other parents and children walked ahead and behind them, their cheerful morning chatter filling the air. Rachel recognized several familiar faces from the neighborhood, but none met her eyes. A few mothers quickly looked away when she glanced in their direction. Their whispered conversations made her skin prickle. As they approached the school gates, the brick building looming before them, Rachel knelt down to Emily's level. She straightened Emily's navy blue uniform sweater, more to keep her hands busy than because it needed fixing. "Remember what we talked about?" Rachel asked, tucking a stray hair behind Emily's ear. Emily nodded solemnly. "Stay with my teachers and friends. Don't go anywhere alone. Wait inside the building for Mrs. Peterson to pick me up for after-school care." "That's my smart girl." Rachel pulled Emily into a tight hug, breathing in the sweet smell of her strawberry shampoo. She held on a few seconds longer than usual, not wanting to let go. "Mom," Emily giggled, squirming in her arms. "Everyone's watching." Rachel reluctantly released her daughter, watching as Emily ran to join her friends by the entrance. She stood at the gate until the morning bell rang and the last child disappeared inside the building. Only then did she turn to head home, her steps heavy with worry. The day dragged on slowly. Rachel tried to keep busy with housework and errands, but her mind kept wandering back to Emily. She jumped at every sound, half expecting to see the stalker's face in her windows. Around noon, she was sorting through the mail when she noticed an official-looking envelope from Emily's school. Settling at the kitchen table, Rachel tore open the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. Her eyes scanned the contents, and her stomach dropped. "Dear parents and guardians," the letter began. "We regret to inform you that due to unexpected budget cuts, we must discontinue our after-school care program effective next week." Rachel read the paragraph 3 times, her hands growing cold. The words seemed to blur together on the page. The school's after-school program had been her lifeline since she'd returned to full-time nursing after her husband's death. It was the only reason she could work her long shifts, knowing Emily was safe and supervised until Mrs. Peterson, their elderly neighbor, picked her up. The letter continued with apologetic explanations about funding challenges and alternative suggestions that felt hollow and unhelpful. Rachel's mind raced through possible solutions. Her hospital shifts ended at 5:00 p.m., but with the bus ride home, she never made it back before 6:00 p.m. That would leave Emily alone for at least 2 hours every day. She glanced at the clock. 2:45 p.m. Emily would be home soon. Mrs. Peterson would bring her back, just like always. But after next week, Rachel's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. "Mommy, I'm home!" Emily's voice rang through the house, followed by the thump of her backpack hitting the floor. "In the kitchen, sweetheart," Rachel called out, quickly wiping her eyes and trying to compose herself. Emily bounced into the kitchen, her face flushed from the walk home. Mrs. Peterson appeared in the doorway behind her, smiling warmly. "She had a wonderful day," the older woman reported. "Even got a gold star in math." "That's wonderful," Rachel managed to say, forcing a smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson." After their neighbor left, Emily pulled out her homework and settled across from Rachel at the kitchen table. She noticed the letter still clutched in her mother's hands. "What's that, Mommy?" Rachel looked down at the crumpled paper, then back at her daughter's curious face. It's a letter from your school, sweetie. Am I in trouble?" Emily's eyes widened with concern. No, nothing like that." Rachel smoothed the letter on the table. "It's about the after-school program." Emily tilted her head, waiting for more information. Her innocence made Rachel's heart ache. "The school, they have to stop the program next week. They don't have enough money to keep it running anymore." Emily frowned, processing this information. She looked up at Rachel with her big brown eyes, her father's eyes, and asked the question Rachel had been dreading. "Does that mean I'll be home alone, Mommy?" Rachel stared at the letter on the table, her throat tight with emotion. The dread that had been building in her stomach all day grew heavier. The image of Emily alone in their house, vulnerable and unprotected, filled her with terror. After what had happened just yesterday, the thought was unbearable. Rachel stood in the church foyer, smoothing Emily's dress and adjusting her own cardigan. The familiar scent of wood polish and old hymnals filled the air as morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the worn carpet. "Good morning, Rachel," Mrs. Thompson called out, but her usual warmth seemed forced. She hurried past without waiting for a response, clutching her Bible to her chest. Emily tugged at Rachel's sleeve. "Can I go sit with Katie?" Rachel nodded, watching her daughter skip down the aisle to join her friend in the third pew. She took a deep breath and plastered on a smile, determined to maintain her composure. This was her church family. They'd known her for years, supported her after Tom's death. Everything would be fine. As she made her way toward her usual seat, she noticed how people shifted in their pews, heads turning together in whispered conversations that died as she approached. The clicking of her modest heels seemed unnaturally loud against the hardwood floor. "That nurse, the one with the stalker," a voice drifted from behind. Rachel's steps faltered, but she kept walking, her face burning. "I heard he followed her home," another voice whispered. "Right here in our neighborhood. We've never had trouble like this before, Rachel slid into an empty pew, her hands trembling as she opened her Bible. The leather cover felt cool against her sweaty palms. She stared at the pages, the words blurring before her eyes. More whispers floated around her like angry wasps. What if he comes back? What about our children? She should have been more careful, bringing all this attention to our quiet community. Each word stung like a tiny arrow. Rachel's throat tightened. She'd come here seeking comfort, hoping to feel God's presence among her church family. Instead, she felt more alone than ever. Emily's laughter rang out from where she sat with Katie, the sweet sound a stark contrast to the hushed judgment surrounding them. Rachel blinked back tears, refusing to let them fall. She wouldn't let Emily see her cry, wouldn't let her daughter know how much the whispers hurt. The organ began to play, and people rustled in their seats, preparing for the service. Rachel stood mechanically for the first hymn, her voice barely a whisper as they sang about God's unfailing love. The irony wasn't lost on her. During the greeting time, several people merely nodded in her direction instead of offering the usual warm hugs. Others simply turned away, creating a bubble of empty space around her. Rachel's chest ached with each subtle rejection. She noticed Mrs. Peterson, who lived 3 houses down, physically guide her teenage daughter to a different pew when the girl started to sit near Rachel. The message was clear. She was a danger to be avoided. Pastor Daniels stood at the pulpit, his weathered face scanning the congregation as he prepared to begin his sermon. His keen eyes, sharpened by years of military chaplaincy, caught the isolation surrounding Rachel. He paused in his introduction, watching the dynamics play out before him. During the offering, Rachel escaped to the bathroom, needing a moment to compose herself. As she pushed open the door, 2 women fell silent, their reflections in the mirror freezing mid-conversation. They hurried out, leaving Rachel alone with the echo of the closing door. She gripped the cold porcelain of the sink, staring at her reflection. The woman looking back seemed smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of judgment. "Lord, give me strength," she whispered. When she returned, she found Pastor Daniels waiting in the hallway, his kind eyes crinkling with concern. He'd removed his reading glasses, holding them in one weathered hand. "Rachel," he said softly, his voice carrying the gentle authority of someone who had seen both battlefield horrors and spiritual struggles. "May I speak with you a moment?" She nodded, fighting to maintain her composure. "I couldn't help but notice you're carrying a heavy burden today," he said, leading her to a quiet corner near the church office. The sounds of the congregation singing hymns drifted faintly through the walls. Rachel's carefully constructed facade cracked. I thought they were my friends, my church family." Her voice broke on the last word. Pastor Daniels placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Fear makes people react in ways that aren't always Christian," he said, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "But remember this, you are not alone. Not ever." "It feels like I am," Rachel admitted, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "They're looking at me like I'm the threat, like I'm the one who—" She couldn't finish. "You're facing this with more courage than most," Pastor Daniels said firmly. "And while some may forget their calling to love their neighbor, God hasn't forgotten you. Neither have I." His words, spoken with such conviction, helped Rachel straighten her shoulders slightly. The military chaplain in him showed through as he continued. "Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with fists or weapons, but with faith and perseverance." "You've got both in spades, Rachel." The door to the sanctuary opened, and Emily poked her head out. "Mommy, it's time for children's church." Rachel quickly dabbed at her eyes, not wanting Emily to see her tears. Pastor Daniels gave her shoulder a final, reassuring squeeze before heading back to the pulpit. After the service, Rachel held Emily's hand as they walked toward the exit. She could still feel the stares, still hear the whispers, but something had shifted inside her. Pastor Daniels' words echoed in her mind. "You are not alone." Emily skipped beside her, clutching a Sunday school craft, blissfully unaware of the morning's undercurrents. Rachel squeezed her daughter's hand, drawing strength from the small fingers wrapped trustingly in hers. She might be viewed as a threat by some, but she was also a mother, a protector, and a child of God. As they reached the church steps, Rachel lifted her chin. The morning sun warmed her face, and a cool breeze carried the scent of blooming dogwoods. The whispers and judgments still hurt, but they wouldn't break her. She had something worth fighting for, and she wouldn't let fear, or the judgment of others, win. The evening shadows stretched across Emily's bedroom as Rachel sat on the edge of her daughter's pink and white bedspread. She tucked the covers snugly around Emily's shoulders, just the way she liked it. The little girl's collection of stuffed animals formed a protective circle around her pillow, with Mr. Whiskers, her favorite rabbit, clutched tightly in her arms. "Mommy?" Emily's voice was small in the dim light of her butterfly nightlight. "What if he comes back?" Rachel's heart clenched at the fear in her daughter's eyes. She smoothed Emily's dark curls away from her forehead, trying to keep her own hands from trembling. "We'll be ready," she promised, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "But how?" Emily pressed, her fingers twisting nervously in Mr. Whisker's worn fur. Rachel leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Remember how Mommy stopped that bad man? That was something I learned in a special class called Jitsu. Maybe it's time we both learned more about how to stay safe." Emily's eyes widened with interest. "Like karate?" "Similar to that. Now close your eyes, sweetheart. God is watching over us, and I'm right down the hall." After one more kiss and a final check of the nightlight, Rachel quietly closed Emily's door, leaving it cracked open just enough to hear if her daughter called out. She padded down the hallway to the living room, where her laptop waited on the coffee table. The house felt too quiet, too empty. Rachel wrapped herself in the soft throw blanket from the couch, seeking comfort in its familiar warmth. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as memories of that night flooded back. The sound of footsteps behind her, the rush of adrenaline, the instinctive way her body had remembered that one self-defense move from years ago. She opened a browser and typed, "Jiu-Jitsu classes near me." The screen filled with results, and Rachel began clicking through them, her determination growing with each link. Some studios looked too intense, others too far away. Then one caught her eye. Family Martial Arts Center. Mother. Daughter classes available. The website showed pictures of women and girls training together, their faces focused but smiling. Rachel clicked through the photos, noticing how the students supported each other, worked together. This wasn't just about learning to fight. It was about building confidence, creating community. She found herself remembering the jiu-jitsu classes she'd taken shortly after college. She'd only gone for a few months, dragged along by an enthusiastic coworker, but those lessons had stuck with her. The instructor had always said that jiu-jitsu was about using leverage and technique rather than strength alone, perfect for someone like her who wasn't particularly strong. Rachel opened another tab and began reading reviews of the studio. "Changed my life," one woman wrote. "My daughter and I both feel so much more confident," said another. The instructor, Sensei Martinez, had 20 years of experience and specialized in teaching women and children. Her cursor moved to the class schedule. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 6:30 p.m. The timing would work. She could adjust her hospital shifts. The cost made her wince slightly, but she thought of Emily's frightened question, "What if he comes back?" Some things were worth any price. A soft creak from Emily's room made Rachel pause. She listened intently, but it was just the house settling. Still, her heart raced at every little sound now. She couldn't live like this, and she couldn't let Emily grow up afraid. Rachel clicked on the registration page and began filling out the forms. Name, age, emergency contact. When she got to reason for interest, her fingers stilled over the keyboard. How could she explain everything in that tiny box? Finally, she typed, "To protect ourselves and each other." The payment page appeared next. Rachel took a deep breath and entered her credit card information. The cursor hovered over the register button as doubt crept in. Was she being too reactive? Maybe the police would catch him. Maybe he wouldn't come back. Maybe... From down the hall, Emily coughed in her sleep, and Rachel's resolve solidified. No more maybes. No more hoping someone else would keep them safe. She clicked, "Register," and immediately felt lighter, as if she'd taken the first step on a new path. The confirmation email arrived instantly. Welcome to Family Martial Arts Center. Your first class is this Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Please arrive 15 minutes early to meet Sensei Martinez. Rachel closed her laptop and pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She thought of the whispers at church, the judgment in their neighbors' eyes. Let them talk. She and Emily would grow stronger together, and no one would make them feel helpless again. She stood and walked to Emily's room, peeking in at her sleeping daughter. Emily had kicked off her covers, as usual, and Rachel gently tucked them back around her. Mr. Whiskers had fallen to the floor, and she placed him back in Emily's arms. Her daughter stirred slightly, murmuring, "Love you, Mommy." "Love you too, baby," Rachel whispered. More than anything in this world. She knew that tomorrow she would tell Emily about the classes. Her daughter's eyes would light up with excitement, and together they would begin this new chapter. But for now, Rachel simply watched her child sleep, grateful for the quiet moment and the promise of action to come. As she turned to leave, Rachel noticed Emily's small charm bracelet on the nightstand, the one they'd picked out together at the church fair last summer. Each charm represented something special to Emily: a cross for faith, a heart for love, a butterfly for hope. Rachel touched it gently, remembering Emily's words from earlier. What if he comes back? Her answer remained the same, but now it carried the weight of commitment. "We'll be ready." Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she pushed open the heavy glass door of Georgetown Martial Arts Center. The familiar scent of clean mats and fresh air from spinning fans filled her nostrils. Emily's small hand gripped hers tightly as they stepped into the bright training space. "It's okay, sweetie," Rachel whispered, though her own heart was racing. The dojo buzzed with activity. Children in white uniforms, called G's, bounced around on thick blue mats, while parents sat on metal folding chairs along the walls, some scrolling on phones, others watching their kids with proud smiles. A few curious glances turned their way. Rachel fought the urge to turn around and leave. She wore black yoga pants and a loose t-shirt, feeling out of place among the sea of crisp white uniforms. "Welcome!" A warm voice cut through Rachel's anxiety. A woman with kind eyes and athletic build approached them, her black belt tied precisely around her waist. "I'm Miss Torres. You must be Rachel and Emily?" Emily partially hid behind Rachel's leg but offered a small wave. Miss Torres crouched down to Emily's eye level with a gentle smile. "Hi there, Emily. Are you ready to learn some cool moves today?" Emily nodded shyly. "Will it hurt?" Miss Torres laughed softly. "Not at all. We start nice and slow, and everyone here helps each other learn. Safety first always." She stood and gestured to a corner of the mat. "There's a changing room through that door. I left 2 loner just for you both. Take your time getting ready." In the changing room, Rachel helped Emily into the white uniform, her fingers fumbling with the unfamiliar cloth belt. "How does it feel, honey?" "It's kind of stiff," Emily said, pulling at the sleeve. "But I feel like a ninja." Rachel changed into her own gi, the fabric awakening distant memories of her brief training years ago. She caught her reflection in the mirror. The uniform made her look different somehow. Stronger, maybe, or just less afraid. Back on the mats, Miss Torres gathered everyone in a circle for warm-ups. "Remember," she called out cheerfully, "Jiu-Jitsu is about using leverage and technique, not strength. Size doesn't matter here." They started with simple movements, shoulder rolls, hip escapes, and basic stretches. Rachel felt stiff and uncoordinated at first, her body resistant to the unfamiliar positions. But slowly, muscle memory began to return. She remembered these movements, buried somewhere deep in her body's knowledge. Emily, meanwhile, took to the warm-ups with the natural flexibility of childhood. She giggled as she rolled across the mat, her earlier nervousness melting away. "Look, Mommy," she called out after completing a perfect forward roll. "I did it!" "Great job, Emily," Miss Torres praised. "Beautiful control on that roll." They moved on to learning a basic self-defense position called guard. Rachel lay on her back while Emily sat between her legs, practicing how to maintain a safe distance using her feet on Emily's hips. Other parent-child pairs worked around them, their laughter and encouragement creating a supportive atmosphere. "That's it, Rachel," Miss Torres guided, adjusting Rachel's grip on Emily's sleeve. "Keep your elbows close to your body. Remember, this position lets you control the distance. You decide when someone gets close." The words struck Rachel deeply. Control, distance, choice. Things she'd felt slipping away since that night at her front door. As they practiced, Rachel noticed Emily's face growing more focused, more determined. Her daughter wasn't just playing anymore, she was learning, understanding. Between drills, Emily watched the more experienced kids with wide-eyed attention, mimicking their movements when she thought no one was looking. "Okay, everyone," Ms. Torres called out near the end of class. "Let's finish with a fun exercise. Parents, sit in guard position. Kids, try to pass their legs to get to the other side. Remember your techniques." Emily's face lit up with competitive spirit. She grabbed Rachel's collar and tried to push past her legs, but Rachel kept her balanced and controlled. They both laughed as Emily made exaggerated struggling noises. "Use your hips, Emily," Ms. Torres encouraged. "That's it. Look for the opening." To Rachel's surprise, Emily managed to slip past her defense, throwing her arms up in victory. "I did it, Mommy. I got through." "You sure did, sweetie." Rachel pulled her daughter into a hug, both of them sweaty but grinning. After class, as they changed back into their regular clothes, Rachel noticed Emily standing taller, moving with new confidence. Other parents smiled and waved as they left, a few introducing themselves and mentioning future playdates. In the parking lot, the setting sun painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Emily skipped beside Rachel, still buzzing with energy from the class. She stopped suddenly and turned to Rachel with a bright smile that lit up her whole face. "Mommy, we're strong now." Rachel felt something warm bloom in her chest, not just pride, but hope. Real hope, for the first time since that dark night. She squeezed Emily's hand and smiled back. They had taken their first step towards something important. Something that felt like taking their lives back. The automatic doors of Wilson's grocery slid open with a soft hiss. Rachel pushed her cart through, mentally checking her shopping list. The familiar fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the smell of fresh bread from the bakery section filled the air. Emily had stayed home with Mrs. Fursenet Peterson, their elderly neighbor, who'd offered to watch her for an hour. Rachel felt the stares almost immediately. As she picked through the produce section, selecting crisp apples and fresh lettuce, she noticed how conversations would pause when she walked by. Some shoppers quickly turned down other aisles when they saw her coming. Others watched her with undisguised curiosity, as if she were some kind of exhibit. "Rachel? Rachel Owens?" She looked up to find Sarah Matthews, one of the church choir members, approaching with genuine concern in her eyes. "How are you holding up, dear? We've all been so worried." Rachel managed a small smile. "We're doing okay, thanks, taking it day by day. If you need anything, meals, someone to watch Emily, just let us know." Sarah squeezed her arm gently before continuing her shopping. The interaction left Rachel feeling a bit lighter, but that changed as she rounded the corner to the cereal aisle. Mrs. Bradford, whose daughter went to school with Emily, deliberately steered her cart away, avoiding eye contact. Two other women whispered behind their hands, stealing glances in her direction. At the dairy section, an elderly man she recognized from church actually smiled and said, "You're one brave lady, Mrs. Owens. Don't let anyone tell you different." His kindness brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Rachel was selecting yogurt flavors Emily would eat when she felt someone standing too close behind her. The hair on the back of her neck prickled. "Mrs. Owens." The voice was cold, clipped. Rachel turned to face Patricia Wellington, head of the PTA and self-appointed neighborhood watchdog. The woman's perfectly styled blonde hair and designer outfit seemed at odds with the harsh expression on her face. "I think we need to have a conversation," Patricia said, her voice low but sharp. "About what you're doing to our community." Rachel's hand tightened on her shopping cart. "I'm just buying groceries, Patricia. Don't play naive. You know exactly what I mean." Patricia stepped closer, invading Rachel's personal space. "We moved here for safety, all of us. This is supposed to be a good neighborhood, and now, because of you, we're all targets. That man could come back any time, and who knows who he might go after next." The words hit Rachel like physical blows, but she forced herself to stand straight. Years of handling difficult patients had taught her something about maintaining composure. "I'm a victim here, Patricia. I didn't ask for any of this. Maybe if you hadn't been walking alone at night." "I was coming home from work," Rachel cut in, her voice firm despite her trembling hands. "From my job as a nurse, caring for people in this community. I have every right to walk home without being attacked." A few other shoppers had stopped to watch the confrontation, their expressions a mix of discomfort and curiosity. "Well, your rights are putting the rest of us at risk," Patricia spat. "My children can't even play in the front yard anymore. Do you know what that's like?" Rachel thought of Emily, who would soon be without after-school care, and something hardened inside her. "Actually, I do. My daughter lives with this fear every day, but we won't hide. We won't let fear control us." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "That's exactly the kind of selfish attitude I'm talking about. You're not thinking about anyone but yourself." "I'm thinking about every woman and child in this community," Rachel replied, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "Because if we let fear win, if we blame the victims instead of the criminals, then we're all less safe." Several onlookers nodded in agreement, but Patricia wasn't finished. "Well, don't expect any sympathy when something else happens. You've brought this on all of us." She turned on her heel and strode away, leaving Rachel standing alone in the dairy aisle. Rachel finished her shopping with shaking hands, aware of the mix of sympathetic and judgmental looks that followed her through the store. The checkout clerk, a teenage girl who often served them, gave her an extra bright smile and carefully packed her bags. "My mom says you're really brave," the girl whispered as she handed Rachel her receipt. The drive home was a blur. After putting away the groceries and thanking Mrs. Peterson, Rachel waited until Emily was absorbed in her homework before retreating to her room. She pulled out the journal her grief counselor had recommended after Tom's death, the one she hadn't touched in months. Sitting cross-legged on her bed, Rachel opened to a fresh page and began to write, "Today I learned that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and standing your ground anyway. The whispers hurt, the judgment stings. But I will not let fear or gossip win. We will rise stronger." She paused, pen hovering over the paper, listening to the sound of Emily humming as she worked on her math problems in the next room. Her daughter's voice, so innocent and determined, made her press the pen back to paper. "They want us to hide, to be ashamed, to make ourselves smaller so they can feel safer. But that's not the answer. The only way through this is forward, head held high. Emily deserves to see her mother stand tall. She deserves to know that being a victim doesn't make you weak. Surviving makes you strong." Rachel adjusted her white belt as she entered the dojo, the familiar scent of wood floors and light sweat greeting her. She was early today, wanting a few moments to center herself before class began. The past few weeks of training had already started changing her. She stood straighter, walked with more confidence, and slept a little better at night. As she stretched on the mat, the door chimed. Rachel glanced up and froze. Sarah Miller and Beth Thompson from church walked in, dressed in workout clothes and looking uncertain. These were the same women who'd avoided her gaze during Sunday service, who'd whispered behind their hands when she passed. "Hi, Rachel," Sarah said softly, clutching her gym bag. We heard good things about this class." Rachel managed a small smile, surprise still coursing through her. "Welcome. Miss Torres is a great instructor." Beth twisted her hands together. "We've been thinking. Maybe we were wrong. About everything. And maybe we could all use some strength." Before Rachel could respond, Emily burst through the door with her usual enthusiasm, her gi slightly rumpled. She spotted the newcomers and waved. "Hi, Mrs. Miller. Hi, Mrs. Thompson. Are you going to learn cool moves with us?" The women's tension visibly eased at Emily's warmth. Sarah smiled. "We're going to try, sweetie." Ms. Torres called the class to order, and Rachel found herself helping Sarah and Beth learn basic stances and falls. There was something powerful about showing them how to stand properly, how to protect themselves. With each shared movement and careful explanation, the invisible wall between them began to crack. "Keep your core tight," Rachel guided Beth through a basic hip escape. "That's it, you've got it." Beth laughed as she completed the move successfully. I never thought I'd be doing this at 43. During partner drills, Rachel noticed how Sarah's hands shook less with each repetition, how Beth's voice grew stronger when calling out, "Stop," in boundary-setting exercises. These weren't just physical changes. Something deeper was shifting. Halfway through class, the door opened again. Pastor Daniels stepped in quietly, his presence warm and steady as always. He sat on one of the wooden benches along the wall, watching with interest as they practiced their techniques. During the water break, he approached their small group. "Ladies," he said, his voice carrying that familiar mix of strength and gentleness, "I hope you don't mind me dropping by. I wanted to see this transformation I've been hearing about." "Pastor Daniels!" Emily bounced over, her energy undiminished. "Did you see my forward roll? I didn't bump my head this time," he chuckled. "I did indeed, Miss Emily. Very impressive." Rachel wiped her forehead with a towel. "What brings you here, Pastor?" He looked around the dojo thoughtfully. "You know, in my years as a Marine chaplain, I learned something important about strength. It's not just about muscles or moves, it's about spirit. About standing together." He paused, his eyes kind. "What you're all doing here. It reminds me of David facing Goliath." Sarah blinked. "David and Goliath? But we're just learning self-defense." "David didn't just pick up those 5 stones and hope for the best," Pastor Daniels explained. "He prepared, he trained, he had faith. But most importantly, he knew he wasn't truly alone." He gestured to their small group. "Look around. This is what community looks like." Beth dabbed at her eyes. "I feel horrible about how we treated you, Rachel. We were scared, and we took it out on you." "Fear does that to people," Pastor Daniels said gently. "But courage? Courage is contagious. Look how it's spreading already." Ms. Torres called them back to training, and Pastor Daniels returned to his seat. The rest of class felt different somehow, lighter, yet more purposeful. When they practiced escapes, they encouraged each other with genuine enthusiasm. When someone struggled with a technique, they all pitched in to help figure it out. Rachel watched Emily demonstrate a move for Mrs. Miller's daughter Katie, who had joined the children's class. The girls giggled together, their friendship blooming alongside their mother's reconciliation. "Remember," Ms. Torres said as they gathered for the end-of-class bow, "in Jiu-Jitsu, we say, tap early, tap often. It's not about ego. It's about learning, growing, and keeping each other safe." After class, as they gathered their bags, Sarah touched Rachel's arm. "Some of us are meeting for coffee after Wednesday night Bible study. Would you and Emily like to join us?" Rachel felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Hope, perhaps, or the simple joy of connection. "We'd like that very much." Pastor Daniels approached as they were leaving. "Rachel, a moment?" She nodded to Emily to wait by the door. "Yes, Pastor?" "I'm proud of you," he said simply. "Not just for learning to defend yourself, but for showing others the way. That takes a special kind of strength." Rachel looked over at Emily, chatting animatedly with Katie, at Sarah and Beth, comparing notes on their new techniques, at Miss Torres demonstrating one last move to a determined student. The dojo had become more than just a training space. It was becoming a sanctuary of sorts, where fears could be faced and bonds could be forged. "I'm not alone anymore, am I?" she said softly. Pastor Daniels smiled. "You never were. Sometimes it just takes a while for us to remember that." As Rachel gathered her things to leave, she felt different than when she'd arrived. The weight of isolation had lifted somewhat, replaced by something stronger. The knowledge that she was part of something bigger than herself. Here, in this unexpected place, surrounded by these unexpected allies, she had found not just physical strength, but the powerful reminder that faith, courage, and community could grow in the most surprising ways. Emily bounded over, her guy bag swinging. "Ready, Mom? Katie invited me to her house after Bible study on Wednesday." Rachel smiled, catching Sarah's warm glance. "Yes, sweetheart. I think we're ready." The autumn breeze rustled through the schoolyard as Emily sat on her favorite bench during recess, her peanut butter and jelly sandwich half-eaten beside her. She watched other kids playing tag and jumping rope, content to have this peaceful moment to herself. The new confidence from her jiu-jitsu classes made her feel different somehow, like she had a special secret that made her stronger inside. Tommy Martinez, a sixth grader known for picking on younger kids, strutted across the playground. He spotted Sarah, a quiet first grader, playing with her favorite stuffed bunny. Emily's stomach tightened as she watched him approach. She knew that look on his face. It was the same one he wore when he'd made Katie cry last week by stealing her glasses. "Hey, baby," Tommy called out to Sarah, reaching for the stuffed animal. "Aren't you too old for toys?" Sarah clutched her bunny tighter, lower lip trembling. "Leave me alone." Emily remembered how it felt to be afraid, those nights after the man had followed her mom home. She thought about what Miss Torres had taught them in class. True strength isn't about hurting others. It's about standing up for what's right. Setting her sandwich down, Emily walked over to where Tommy towered over Sarah. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her voice came out steady and clear. "Stop it, Tommy. Leave her alone." Tommy turned, surprise flickering across his face before he smirked. "Mind your own business, Owens." Emily planted her feet firmly, just like she did before practice rolls at the dojo. "Sarah is my business. You're being a bully, and it's not okay." "Oh yeah?" Tommy took a step toward her. "What are you going to do about it?" Emily didn't flinch. Instead, she remembered her mom's words. "Sometimes the strongest move is staying calm when others try to scare you." She looked Tommy straight in the eye. "I'm not going to fight you, Tommy, but I'm not afraid of you either. And if you don't stop bothering Sarah, I'm going to tell Mrs. Peterson exactly what you've been doing at recess." Other kids had stopped playing to watch. Tommy glanced around, noticing the audience. His face reddened. "Whatever," he muttered, backing away. "It's stupid anyway." He shuffled off toward the basketball courts, shoulders hunched. Sarah looked up at Emily with wide eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging her bunny close. Emily smiled, her heart still racing but now with excitement rather than fear. "Want to come sit with me? I have cookies to share." Later that evening, Emily could hardly wait to tell her mom about what happened. Rachel was stirring a pot of mac and cheese, Emily's favorite, when she burst out with the story. "And then, Mom, I remembered what you said about being strong on the inside." Emily's words tumbled out between bites. "I wasn't even scared. Well, maybe a little, but the good kind of scared, you know." Rachel set down her fork, her eyes shining with pride. "You stood up for someone who needed help, sweetheart. That's what real strength is all about." Emily nodded eagerly. "That's what Ms. Torres says too. And Mom." She paused, pushing her empty bowl aside. "I used to be scared all the time after that man followed you home. But now?" She sat up straighter. "Now I know we can handle anything. Jiu-Jitsu isn't just about the moves. It's about feeling strong in here." She pointed to her heart. Rachel came around the table and pulled Emily into a tight hug. Her daughter's words touched something deep inside her. All those sleepless nights, all the worried glances over her shoulder, all the whispers at church. None of that mattered compared to this moment. "You know what, sweetie?" Rachel stroked Emily's hair. "You're absolutely right. We are stronger now, both of us." Emily snuggled closer. "Way stronger." Rachel kissed the top of her daughter's head and whispered, "We're stronger every day." The morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of the small church, casting colorful patterns across the wooden pews. Rachel sat in her usual spot near the middle, Emily's warm hand in hers, as the congregation began filing out after the service. The familiar scent of old hymnals and wood polish filled the air. Pastor Daniels made his way through the crowd, stopping to chat briefly with various members. His weathered face carried the gentle wisdom earned from years as a Marine chaplain. When he reached Rachel's pew, his kind eyes crinkled at the corners. "Rachel, could I have a word?" he asked, gesturing toward a quiet corner near the altar. Rachel nodded, giving Emily's hand a squeeze. "Sweetie, why don't you go say hi to Mrs. Thompson? She brought those cookies you like." Emily skipped off toward the refreshment table, while Rachel followed Pastor Daniels. Her sensible nurse's shoes clicked softly against the worn floorboards. "I've been thinking," Pastor Daniels began, his deep voice warm and steady. "The community festival is coming up next weekend. We usually have a few speakers share their testimonies. and I believe your story could touch many hearts." Rachel's stomach tightened. "Oh, I don't know, Pastor." She twisted her hands together, a nervous habit she'd never quite broken. "People are already talking. I'm not sure I want to draw more attention." "That's exactly why your voice matters," he said gently. "You've shown remarkable courage these past weeks. The self-defense classes, protecting Emily, keeping your faith strong despite everything. These are powerful examples of God's grace in action." Rachel glanced around the church, noting how some members still gave her a wide berth, their whispered conversations falling silent when she passed. "But what if they don't want to hear it? What if I make things worse?" Pastor Daniels laid a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Remember what you told me about your first Jitsu class? How terrified you were to walk through that door." Rachel smiled slightly at the memory. "I almost turned around 3 times, but you didn't. And look at how that decision has rippled through our community. Sarah and Jennifer joined because of your example. Now their daughters are training too." Emily bounded back over, chocolate chip cookie in hand. "Mommy, Mrs. Thompson says I'm getting so tall." She noticed her mother's tense expression. "What's wrong?" Rachel smoothed Emily's hair. "Pastor Daniels asked if I would speak at the festival next weekend. Tell my story to everyone." Emily's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? That would be so cool." She grabbed Rachel's hand. "You should do it, Mommy. You always tell me to be brave when I'm scared." Rachel's heart squeezed at her daughter's words. She'd been trying so hard to model courage for Emily, and here was her little girl reflecting it right back. "Your daughter is wise beyond her years," Pastor Daniels said with a gentle smile. "Think about it, Rachel. Pray on it. But remember, sometimes God calls us to be vulnerable, so others can find their own strength." Rachel took a deep breath, looking between her daughter's eager face and the pastor's encouraging one. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Okay, I'll do it." Emily threw her arms around Rachel's waist. "You'll be amazing, Mommy. Can I help you practice?" Pastor Daniels pulled a small notebook from his pocket and wrote something down. "The festival starts at 2 p.m. next Saturday. We'll have you speak around 3:30, when most people are there." He tore out the page and handed it to her. "These are some thoughts to help structure your testimony, but speak from your heart. That's where the truth lives." Rachel folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her purse, trying to ignore the trembling in her fingers. They said goodbye to Pastor Daniels and walked home through the crisp autumn afternoon, Emily chattering excitedly about what her mother should wear and how she would sit right in the front row. That night, after tucking Emily into bed, Rachel lay awake in her darkened bedroom. The street lamp outside cast long shadows on her ceiling, and she could hear crickets chirping through the slightly open window. Her mind raced with all the ways her speech could go wrong. She imagined the festival crowd, hundreds of faces turned toward her, some supportive, others judgmental. What if her voice shook? What if she forgot what to say? What if someone heckled her? The what-ifs piled up like stones on her chest until she could hardly breathe. Rolling onto her side, Rachel clasped her hands together and closed her eyes. "Lord," she whispered into the darkness, "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. I'm not a public speaker. I'm just me." Her throat tightened with emotion. "But if sharing my story can help even one person feel less alone, less afraid." She took a shaky breath. "Please give me the courage to do this. To be the example Emily needs. To show others that faith can overcome fear." The quiet of the night wrapped around her like a blanket, and as she continued to pray, Rachel felt something shift inside her. Not confidence exactly, but a small spark of hope. Maybe her story, with all its messy truth and hard-won wisdom, was exactly what someone needed to hear. She thought of Emily's words, "You always tell me to be brave." Her daughter's simple faith in her made Rachel want to live up to that trust. She remembered how alone she'd felt that night of the attack, and during the dark days that followed. If her voice could help break through someone else's isolation, wasn't that worth facing her fears? Rachel turned again, pulling her blanket up to her chin. The festival was a week away. 7 days to find the right words, to gather her courage, to prepare her heart. As she finally drifted towards sleep, she held onto the image of Emily's proud face and Pastor Daniel's gentle encouragement. Whatever happened, she wouldn't be standing up there alone. Her last conscious thought was a prayer. Lord, help me be strong enough to share your light. The morning sun painted the community park in warm golden hues. Red and white striped tents dotted the grass, their banners fluttering in the gentle breeze. The scent of grilled hot dogs and sweet cotton candy filled the air as families streamed into the annual festival, their chatter and laughter creating a cheerful buzz. Rachel stood behind the small stage, her hands trembling as she shuffled through her note cards for the 100th time. The blue ink of her carefully written words blurred before her eyes. Her throat felt dry despite the bottle of water she'd been sipping. "You okay, Mom?" Emily appeared at her side, wearing her favorite yellow sundress. Her face glowed with excitement as she squeezed Rachel's hand. "Just nervous, sweetie." Rachel managed a shaky smile. "There are so many people." "You've got this," Emily said with complete confidence. "Remember what Ms. Torres says in class. Take deep breaths and believe in yourself." Pastor Daniels approached, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Almost time, Rachel. The crowd's ready whenever you are." Rachel nodded, smoothing her simple floral dress. She could hear the murmur of voices growing as more people gathered near the stage. Some familiar faces from church sat in the front row, including the 2 women who had joined her jiu-jitsu class. They smiled encouragingly. "Ladies and gentlemen," Pastor Daniels's voice boomed through the microphone. "Please welcome Rachel Owens, who has a special message to share with our community today." Rachel's legs felt like jelly as she climbed the 3 steps to the stage. The wooden platform creaked beneath her feet. Faces, dozens of them, turned toward her. Some friendly, some curious, some still carrying traces of judgment. The microphone stood before her like a sentinel. She cleared her throat. "Good morning," she began, her voice quavering slightly. "A few months ago, I walked home alone in the dark. Like many of you, I thought our neighborhood was completely safe. I never imagined." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I never imagined I would become a target." The crowd grew still. Even the children stopped running and playing to listen. That night, when danger found me, I felt utterly alone. No neighbors were around. No cars passed by. No lights were on in nearby houses. "No one's around to help you." Those words echoed in my mind, and they haunted me long after. Rachel's eyes found Emily in the crowd, her daughter's presence giving her strength. But something unexpected happened. Years ago, I had taken some self-defense classes. In that moment of fear, my body remembered. I fought back. I survived. She saw heads nodding, faces softening with understanding. Yet the battle wasn't over. Fear followed me home. Whispers followed me to church. Judgment followed me through the grocery store. Some people treated me like I had brought trouble to our peaceful community. A few faces in the crowd reddened with shame, eyes lowering. "But here's what I learned," Rachel continued, her voice growing stronger. "True safety isn't about walls or locks or even martial arts moves. It's about community. It's about standing together." When 2 wonderful women from our church joined my jiu-jitsu class, something changed. When Pastor Daniels offered words of encouragement, something shifted. When neighbors began reaching out instead of turning away, healing began. She set aside her note cards, speaking now from her heart. "Fear tries to isolate us. It whispers that we're alone, that no one will help, that we don't belong. But faith tells us something different. Faith brings us together. Faith reminds us that we're stronger as one." Tears glistened in several eyes now. Rachel saw Mrs. Thompson, who had confronted her in the grocery store, dabbing at her cheeks with a tissue. "I stand here today not as a victim, but as a survivor. Not as an outsider, but as a member of this community, and I want to share what I've learned. Strength is not in standing alone, but in standing together." The applause started slowly, then swelled. People rose to their feet. Emily's voice rang out clear and proud. "That's my mom!" Rachel stepped back from the microphone, her heart full. People surged forward to greet her as she descended from the stage. Mrs. Thompson reached her first, enveloping her in a tight hug. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "You're right, we should have supported you from the beginning." Others followed, church members, neighbors, parents, from Emily's school. Some offered hugs, others handshakes or words of encouragement. "Thank you for your bravery. You've inspired us. We're here for you." Emily bounded through the crowd and threw her arms around Rachel's waist. "Mom, you were amazing! Everyone was crying!" Rachel hugged her daughter close, feeling lighter than she had in months. The fear that had weighed her down seemed to lift, replaced by something warmer, stronger, hope. Looking around at the faces of her neighbors, no longer seeing judgment but understanding, she finally felt truly safe. The morning sun seemed brighter now, the festival more joyous. Children resumed their games, parents chatted in groups, and the smell of barbecue wafted through the air. But something had changed. The community felt closer, more connected, as if invisible walls had crumbled under the weight of shared understanding and compassion. The living room glowed with the warm light of table lamps as Rachel hummed softly, gathering paper plates and cups from the festival into a garbage bag. Her chest felt lighter than it had in weeks. The memory of standing on that stage, sharing her story, and seeing understanding bloom across so many faces filled her with quiet joy. She straightened the purple throw pillows on the couch, Emily's favorite color, and smiled at the crayon drawing her daughter had made at the festival. It showed two stick figures doing jujitsu moves with "Me and Mom equal strong" written in wobbly letters across the top. Rachel picked it up, planning to hang it on the fridge with the others. The evening had been perfect. Neighbors who'd once crossed the street to avoid her had approached with hugs and apologies. Mrs. Chen, from 3 doors down, had brought over her famous dumplings. Even Tom Wilson, the grumpy retired teacher who complained about everything, had shaken her hand and muttered, "Good speech." Pastor Daniel's words still echoed in her mind. "You've given this community something precious, the reminder that we're all connected, all responsible for each other." A soft scraping sound from the front door made Rachel freeze. The paper in her hand crinkled as her fingers tightened. She held her breath, listening. There it was again, a scratching, sliding noise. Her heart began to pound. The warmth of the evening evaporated, replaced by an icy trickle of fear down her spine. Rachel set down the drawing with trembling hands and moved cautiously toward the entryway. The scraping stopped. Through the narrow window beside the door, the porch light revealed nothing but empty darkness. Rachel's fingers found the deadbolt, checking it was secure. It was. A shadow moved beneath the door, something being pushed through. Rachel stumbled back, her shoulder hitting the wall. A white rectangle of paper now lay on her welcome mat, stark against the dark flooring. She stared at it, willing it to be a late advertisement or a note from a neighbor. But neighbors don't slip notes under doors at night. Her legs felt weak as she forced herself to approach. The paper was ordinary printer paper, folded once. With shaking fingers, Rachel bent to pick it up. The moment she unfolded it, her blood ran cold. 5 words, typed in plain black letters. "You can't fight forever." The paper slipped from her numb fingers, floating to the floor like a fallen leaf. Rachel's vision blurred as panic clawed at her chest, squeezing the air from her lungs. The comfortable security of her home shattered like glass. He had been here, right outside her door, while she tidied and hummed and felt safe. "Emily," she whispered. Rachel spun and ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, her sock-clad feet silent on the carpet. Her daughter's door was ajar, just as they'd left it. The butterfly nightlight cast a soft pink glow across the room. Emily lay curled on her side, one arm wrapped around her stuffed giraffe. Her face was peaceful in sleep, dark lashes resting against her cheeks. She looked so small, so vulnerable. Rachel's throat tightened as she watched her daughter's chest rise and fall with steady breaths. Emily didn't know. She was lost in innocent dreams, unaware of the evil that had crept to their doorstep. Moving quietly, Rachel checked the window lock, then pulled the curtains tighter closed. She couldn't bear to wake Emily, to see fear cloud those bright eyes again. Not after such a wonderful day. Not when her little girl had finally started feeling safe. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights sweeping across the walls. Rachel flinched at the moving shadows. The threatening note lay downstairs like a snake in their home, poisoning their peace with its presence. She needed to call the police, to report it, to do something. But for now, she couldn't move. She sank into the pink bean-bag chair beside Emily's bed, her eyes fixed on her sleeping daughter. The sound of Emily's soft breathing gradually steadied Rachel's own racing heart. "I won't let him hurt you," Rachel whispered fiercely into the darkness. "I promise." She sat there in the dim pink light, standing guard over her daughter's dreams, as the night pressed heavy against the windows and fear prowled outside their door. Rachel glanced at the kitchen clock for the 100th time. 3:45 p.m. Emily should have walked through the door 15 minutes ago. Her daughter was never late. They had a strict routine. Walk straight home from school, no stops, no detours. She paced the kitchen, her nurse's shoes squeaking against the linoleum floor. Maybe Emily had stayed behind to finish an art project. Or perhaps Mrs. Thompson, her favorite teacher, had asked for help organizing books. But Emily knew better than to do that without calling first. 4:00 p.m. Rachel's hands trembled as she dialed Emily's teacher. "Hi, Mrs. Thompson. This is Rachel Owens, Emily's mom." "Oh, hello, Mrs. Owens. Is everything all right?" "Emily hasn't come home yet. I was wondering if she stayed late." There was a pause on the line. "No, I saw her leave with the other children at dismissal. She walked toward the bus stop like usual." Rachel's throat tightened. "What time exactly did she leave?" "Right at 3:30, same as always." The phone nearly slipped from Rachel's sweating palm. She thanked Mrs. Thompson and hung up, then immediately called the school office. The secretary confirmed Emily had left at normal dismissal time. 4:15 p.m. Rachel grabbed her keys and rushed out the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the suburban streets as she walked toward the school, checking every yard and driveway along the way. "Emily!" she called out, not caring if the neighbors stared. "Emily, sweetie, where are you?" No response except the distant barking of dogs and the rustle of wind through autumn leaves. She reached the corner where Emily usually turned off the main road. Nothing seemed out of place until something caught her eye in the bushes near the bus stop. Rachel's legs went weak as she approached. There, tangled in the lower branches of an azalea bush, was Emily's charm bracelet. The silver trinkets glinted in the late afternoon sun. The ballet shoes charm Rachel had given her for her first recital, the little cross from her baptism, the heart with "Mom" engraved on it from last Christmas. Rachel reached for it with shaking fingers. Emily loved this bracelet. She never took it off, not even for bath time, but there it was, deliberately placed where someone would find it. The realization hit Rachel like a physical blow. Emily must have left it as a clue. Her clever, brave girl had remembered what they'd discussed about leaving signs if something went wrong. Pride mingled with terror in Rachel's chest as she clutched the bracelet to her heart. 4:30 p.m. The world spun around her as Rachel's knees gave out. She sank to the ground, the concrete sidewalk rough against her legs. The bracelet's metal links bit into her palm as she squeezed it tight. "Please, God," she sobbed, doubling over as waves of fear threatened to drown her. "Please keep her safe. Please help me find her." Tears fell freely now, splashing onto the sidewalk as Rachel rocked back and forth. The last words Emily had said this morning echoed in her mind. "Love you, Mommy. See you after school." The thought of Emily alone and scared somewhere, or worse, with him, made Rachel's chest constrict until she could barely breathe. Her baby girl, who still slept with a nightlight and needed help braiding her hair, who giggled during tickle fights and asked for second helpings of mac and cheese, who had been so proud of learning self-defense moves, even though they both prayed she'd never need them. Rachel pressed the bracelet to her lips, tasting salt from her tears. The charms clinked together softly, a sound that usually made Emily smile. Now it felt like a cry for help. "I'm coming, baby," Rachel whispered through her tears. "Mommy's coming. Just hold on." She stayed there on her knees, shoulders shaking with sobs as the afternoon shadows grew longer around her. The bracelet in her hand was both a blessing and a curse. Proof that Emily was clever enough to leave a trail, but also confirmation of Rachel's worst fears. Her daughter was gone. The church sanctuary stood silent and dark, moonlight filtering through the stained glass windows and casting colored shadows across the wooden pews. Rachel sat in the front row, her shoulders slumped, Emily's charm bracelet clutched tightly in her trembling hands. The tiny charms, a heart, a cross, and a ballet slipper, pressed into her palm, their familiar shapes a painful reminder of her daughter's absence. The police had come and gone, taking notes, asking questions, and promising to do everything they could, but their reassurances felt hollow. 7 hours had passed since Emily should have walked through their front door. 7 hours of growing terror, of imagining the worst, of feeling her world crumble piece by piece. The sound of footsteps echoed through the empty sanctuary. Rachel didn't turn around. She knew those steady, measured steps. Pastor Daniel's. He had given her the key to the church years ago, telling her the sanctuary was always open when she needed peace. "I thought I might find you here," he said softly, settling into the pew beside her. His presence was solid, grounding, like an anchor in a storm. Rachel's voice cracked as she spoke. "I failed her, Pastor. I was supposed to protect her." She opened her palm, revealing the charm bracelet. "She dropped this as a clue. My smart, brave little girl. She's counting on me, and I don't know what to do." Pastor Daniels gently took the bracelet, studying it in the dim light. "You haven't failed her, Rachel. You've taught her strength, courage, and faith. Those lessons don't disappear in moments of crisis. They shine brightest. But I brought this danger into our lives. The whole town was right." Tears spilled down Rachel's cheeks. "If I had just stayed quiet, kept to myself." "Stop right there," Pastor Daniels said firmly. His voice, though kind, carried the authority of his years as a Marine chaplain. "Evil thrives in silence. You chose to stand up, to fight back. That's not bringing danger, that's showing evil it can't win." Rachel shook her head, her words tumbling out in a rush of fear and guilt. "I feel so lost, so abandoned. I've been praying all day, begging God for help, for a sign, anything. But there's nothing. Just silence." Pastor Daniels turned slightly in the pew to face her. The moonlight caught the silver in his hair, highlighting the compassion in his weathered face. "Rachel, do you remember the story of Daniel in the lion's den?" "Of course," she whispered. "He wasn't abandoned in that den. God was with him in the darkness, even when he couldn't see the way out. Just like he's with Emily right now, and with you." Rachel's hands twisted in her lap. "But how can I be sure? How can I keep believing when I'm so scared?" "Faith isn't the absence of fear," Pastor Daniels said gently. "It's finding courage in spite of it. You've already shown that courage, in defending yourself, in standing up to gossip, in teaching Emily to be strong." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn Bible. "Let's pray together, not just for Emily's safety, but for your strength. Because that little girl needs her warrior mother right now." Rachel nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Pastor Daniel's voice filled the sanctuary, steady and sure. "Lord, we come before you in this dark hour, knowing that no darkness is too deep for your light to penetrate. We lift up Emily to you, asking for your protection over her. Give her courage, wisdom, and the certainty that she is not alone." Rachel felt something shift inside her as the prayer continued. The paralyzing fear began to give way to a different kind of energy, determination, resolve, the fierce love of a mother who would move heaven and earth for her child. "And Lord," Pastor Daniels continued, "we pray for Rachel. Fill her with your strength. Remind her that you have equipped her for this battle, that the same power that raised Christ from the dead lives within her." "Amen," Rachel whispered, her voice stronger now. They sat in silence for a moment, the moonlight painting patterns on the floor. Pastor Daniels handed the charm bracelet back to Rachel. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "Emily dropping this wasn't just clever, it was brave. She trusts you to understand, to follow, to find her. That trust comes from watching you face your own fears head on." Rachel closed her fingers around the bracelet, feeling each charm press against her skin. The cross charm caught the moonlight, glinting like a tiny beacon. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "I'm going to find her," she said, her voice steady and clear in the quiet sanctuary. Rachel's hands gripped the steering wheel as Pastor Daniels navigated from the passenger seat, his weathered fingers tracing a map spread across his lap. The charm bracelet dangled from the rearview mirror, catching the late afternoon sun. They followed the rural road, where a jogger had reported seeing Emily with a man earlier that day. "Turn right up ahead," Pastor Daniels said softly, his military training evident in his calm demeanor. "The Thompsons' old dairy farm should be just beyond those trees." Rachel's throat tightened as they rounded the bend. An abandoned barn loomed ahead, its red paint peeling and gray boards weathered by years of neglect. Tall grass swayed in the breeze, and a rusted tractor sat like a silent sentinel near the entrance. "We should call the police," Pastor Daniels suggested, his voice steady but concerned. Rachel shook her head. "They're still searching the park on the other side of town. By the time they get here." She couldn't finish the sentence. Every minute felt like an eternity with Emily missing. They parked behind a cluster of trees, out of sight from the barn's windows. Rachel's heart pounded as they crept toward the building. Her jujitsu training kicked in automatically. Stay low, move quietly, be aware of your surroundings. Pastor Daniels touched her arm, pointing to fresh tire tracks in the mud. Someone had been here recently. They approached the side door, its rusty hinges creaking softly as Rachel eased it open. The barn's interior was dim and musty. Shafts of sunlight pierced through gaps in the wooden walls, illuminating dancing dust motes. Old hay bales were stacked along one wall, farm equipment scattered about like forgotten toys. The air felt heavy with age and decay. A muffled sound came from above. Rachel's heart leaped. She knew that sound. Emily's voice. "Mommy?" The whispered word floated down from the hayloft. Rachel's eyes darted upward, adjusting to the gloom. There, in the shadows of the upper level, she could make out Emily's small form. Her daughter was tied to a support beam, but alive and apparently unharmed. "I'm here, baby," Rachel called softly. "Stay calm. We're coming." Before they could move toward the ladder, a deep voice echoed through the barn. How touching! The brave mother comes to save her little girl. The stalker emerged from behind a stack of hay bales, his face twisted in a sneer. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dark clothes that blended with the shadows. In his hand, something metallic glinted. "You should have stayed away," he taunted, moving to block their path to the ladder. "Playing hero at your little community festival? Did you really think you could change anything?" Pastor Daniels stepped forward, his voice firm. "You don't have to do this. There's still a chance to make the right choice." The stalker laughed, a hollow sound that echoed off the barn walls. "The right choice? I'm teaching them all a lesson. Women like her," he jerked his head toward Rachel, "need to learn their place, need to learn about fear." Rachel felt an odd calm settle over her. This man had terrorized her, had taken her daughter, had tried to break her spirit, but he had also taught her something different than he intended. He had taught her that she was stronger than fear. She moved deliberately, positioning herself between the stalker and Pastor Daniels. Her feet found solid ground, automatically settling into the fighting stance she'd practiced countless times in class. "Emily," she called out, her voice steady and clear. "Close your eyes, baby. Mommy's got this." The stalker's cruel laugh echoed through the barn's musty air. "You should have stayed away," he sneered, taking a menacing step forward. Rachel's heart pounded, but her feet remained planted firmly on the dirt floor, her body automatically shifting into the defensive stance she'd practiced countless times. "Emily, baby, keep your eyes closed," Rachel called out, her voice steadier than she felt. Pastor Daniels moved to position himself between the stalker and Emily, who was tied to an old wooden post. The man lunged suddenly, his arms reaching for Rachel's throat. But this time she was ready. Months of training kicked in as she stepped to the side, grabbing his extended arm and using his own momentum to throw him off balance. He stumbled, but didn't fall. "You've learned some tricks," he spat, circling her like a predator. The afternoon light filtering through the barn's broken boards cast shifting shadows across his face. Rachel's breath came in controlled bursts, just as she'd practiced. She could hear Ms. Torres's voice in her head. "Stay centered. Control your breathing. Wait for your moment." He charged again, faster this time. Rachel dropped her weight, executing the hip throw she'd drilled hundreds of times with Emily. The stalker hit the ground hard, but immediately rolled and sprang back up, rage contorting his features. "Rachel, to your left," Pastor Daniels warned, as the stalker grabbed a rusty pipe from a pile of debris. She barely dodged the swing, feeling the air whoosh past her face. Her training took over again. She caught his arm mid-swing, twisting it the way she'd learned, forcing him to drop the pipe. It clattered to the ground as he howled in pain and fury. But he was strong. Stronger than any training partner she'd faced. He broke free and caught her with a glancing blow to the shoulder. Rachel stumbled back, pain shooting down her arm. Emily screamed. "You're nothing," the stalker taunted, advancing again. "Just another scared little woman." Rachel's fear crystallized into something harder, sharper. "No," she said through gritted teeth. "I'm a mother, protecting her child." He rushed her, but Rachel was ready. She sidestepped, caught his arm, and executed a perfect armbar. The move she'd practiced until her muscles ached. The stalker's momentum worked against him as she took him to the ground. Pastor Daniels moved quickly for his age, helping Rachel maintain control as the stalker thrashed and cursed. Together, they kept him pinned, Rachel applying pressure to his shoulder joint while Daniels used his weight to keep the man's legs immobile. "You can't hold me forever," the stalker snarled, but Rachel could hear the first note of fear in his voice. "I don't need to," Rachel panted, maintaining the hold despite her trembling muscles. "I just need to hold you long enough." As if on cue, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. The stalker renewed his struggles, but Rachel held firm, remembering every lesson, every practice session, every moment that had led to this. Red and blue lights flashed through the barn's broken windows. Car doors slammed outside. Heavy footsteps approached rapidly. "Police! Everyone freeze!" Officers burst through the barn doors, weapons drawn. Rachel maintained her hold until they reached her, only releasing the stalker when an officer took control. "Rachel Owens?" one officer asked as they handcuffed the struggling man. "We got your message about the Thompson barn. Are you all right?" But Rachel was already scrambling to her feet, rushing to Emily. Pastor Daniels had begun untying her bonds. The moment Emily was free, Rachel fell to her knees, gathering her daughter into her arms. "Mommy," Emily sobbed, clinging to her. "You came for me. Always, baby," Rachel choked out, holding Emily so tight she worried she might hurt her, but unable to let go. "I will always come for you." Emily's tears soaked into Rachel's shirt as they clung to each other. Rachel could hear the officers reading the stalker his rights, could hear Pastor Daniels talking to the police, but none of it mattered. All that mattered was Emily's warmth in her arms, her daughter's heart beating against her chest, the knowledge that they were safe, truly safe. At last. "You did it, Mommy," Emily whispered. "You were so strong." Rachel pulled back just enough to look into her daughter's tear-stained face. "We did it together, baby. You were so brave leaving us that clue. You're my hero, too." Emily managed a wobbly smile, and Rachel pulled her close again, her own tears falling freely now. Around them, police officers secured the scene, radios crackled with updates, and Pastor Daniels' steady voice provided details to the investigators. But in that moment, holding her daughter, Rachel felt nothing but gratitude and relief washing over her in overwhelming waves. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room cast a sterile glow over Emily as the doctor gently examined her wrists where the ropes had left angry red marks. Rachel sat nearby on another examination bed, wincing as a nurse dabbed antiseptic on her scraped knuckles. Her body ached from the fight, but her eyes never left her daughter. "You're being so brave," Rachel called out softly to Emily, who managed a small smile despite her exhaustion. "Just like you, Mommy," Emily replied, her voice stronger than Rachel expected. The pediatrician, Dr. Martinez, finished wrapping Emily's wrists in soft gauze. "These should heal nicely," she assured them both. "No permanent damage." She turned to Rachel with kind eyes. "You've got quite a fighter here." She kept her head in a scary situation. Rachel's eyes welled with tears of pride. "She dropped her bracelet on purpose, left us a trail." Smart thinking, the doctor agreed, giving Emily a gentle pat on the shoulder. Now I want you both to rest and drink plenty of fluids. The physical injuries will heal quickly, but remember, it's okay to talk to someone about what happened. As Dr. Martinez left the room, Detective Sarah Chen entered, her badge glinting under the harsh lighting. She carried 2 cups of hot chocolate, handing them carefully to Rachel and Emily. "I thought you both could use something comforting," the detective said, pulling up a chair. Her presence had become familiar over the past weeks, a steady source of support through their ordeal. Rachel wrapped her hands around the warm cup, letting its heat seep into her bruised fingers. "Thank you," she murmured, watching as Emily took careful sips of her own drink. "I wanted to tell you personally," Detective Chen began, her voice firm and reassuring. "We found evidence in the barn linking him to 3 other cases across state lines. With the attempted kidnapping of Emily and the assault on you, plus the previous attack, he's looking at serious federal charges. He won't see daylight again for a very long time." Relief flooded through Rachel's body, making her shoulders sag. "You're sure?" "Absolutely certain," the detective confirmed. "The FBI is involved now. They're building an airtight case." A knock at the door drew their attention. Pastor Daniels stood in the doorway, his usually pristine collar askew and a small bandage above his eyebrow where he'd taken a hit during the fight. "May I come in?" he asked softly. "Pastor," Emily brightened, setting down her hot chocolate. He entered the room with careful steps, his weathered face creasing with concern as he took in their injuries. "How are my brave warriors doing?" Rachel reached out and caught his hand, squeezing it tightly. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "If you hadn't been there." "God puts us where we need to be," he said simply, patting her hand. "Though I must say, you hardly needed my help. Those jujitsu classes certainly paid off." Emily nodded enthusiastically. "Mommy was amazing. She did that move Miss Torres taught us last week, the one where you." She demonstrated with her arms, nearly spilling her hot chocolate. Detective Chen caught the cup just in time, chuckling. "Careful there, champion." A nurse entered with discharge papers, explaining the follow-up care instructions. Rachel listened carefully, though her mind kept drifting to the moment in the barn when she'd faced down her tormentor. The fear had been there, yes, but something stronger had taken over. A fierce, protective love that gave her more strength than she'd known she possessed. As they gathered their belongings to leave, Pastor Daniels offered to drive them home. "I think you've had enough excitement for one day," he said, jingling his car keys. The ride home was quiet, Emily dozing against Rachel's shoulder in the back seat. Streetlights swept across their faces as they drove through the familiar neighborhoods. Everything looked different now. Not threatening anymore, just peaceful. When they pulled up to the house, Pastor Daniels insisted on checking inside first. Rachel waited on the porch with Emily, holding her close. The porch light cast a warm glow around them, so different from the harsh shadows that had haunted them for weeks. "All clear," Pastor Daniels called from inside. "I've turned on all the lights for you." Rachel and Emily walked in together, hand in hand. Their home felt like their sanctuary again, not a place of fear. The familiar sense of home, Emily's favorite apple-scented candle, the lavender laundry detergent they always used, wrapped around them like a comforting blanket. "Would you like me to stay?" Pastor Daniels offered, hovering near the door. Rachel shook her head, surprising herself with her certainty. "No, thank you. We'll be okay now." She met his eyes. "But thank you. For everything. For believing in me when others didn't. For standing beside us today." He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "That's what community is for, Rachel. And you've taught us all something about courage." He bent down to Emily's level. "Both of you have." After Pastor Daniels left, Rachel helped Emily get ready for bed. They went through their normal routine, pajamas, teeth brushing, a glass of water, but everything felt more precious now. "Can I sleep with you tonight, Mommy?" Emily asked as Rachel tucked her into her own bed. Rachel considered for a moment, then shook her head gently. "I think we should both sleep in our own beds tonight, sweetheart. We're safe now, and we're strong." Emily nodded, understanding in her young face. "Because we're not afraid anymore?" "That's right," Rachel said, smoothing Emily's hair back from her forehead. "And if we do feel scared, we know what to do. We face it together." Like in Jiu-Jitsu, Emily yawned. We fall down, but we get back up. Exactly like that, Rachel smiled, leaning down to kiss her daughter's forehead. I love you so much, Emily. Love you too, Mommy, Emily murmured, her eyes already closing. Rachel stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her daughter's peaceful breathing. Then she went to her own room, changed into comfortable pajamas, and slipped between her sheets. The familiar comfort of her own bed felt like a blessing. Her muscles ached, and her bruises throbbed dully. But her mind was quiet. For the first time in weeks, there were no threatening notes to fear, no shadows to watch, no need to check the locks twice. Rachel closed her eyes, listening to the gentle hum of the house settling around them. Down the hall, she could hear Emily's soft breathing. They were home, they were safe, they were strong. Sleep came easily, deep, and peaceful, to both mother and daughter that night. Rachel hesitated at the church entrance that Sunday morning, her hand wrapped protectively around Emily's. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the worn wooden steps. Her heart thumped against her ribs as she remembered the whispers and judgmental stares from what felt like a lifetime ago. Emily squeezed her hand. It's okay, Mommy. We're strong now, remember? Rachel smiled down at her daughter, drawing strength from her unwavering faith. Together, they pulled open the heavy wooden doors and stepped inside. The familiar scent of polished pews and old hymnals wrapped around them. The usual pre-service chatter died down as heads turned toward them. Rachel's breath caught in her throat, preparing for the worst. But instead of whispers, a slow clapping started from the back of the church. It spread through the congregation like a wave, building into thunderous applause. Mrs. Thompson, who had once crossed the street to avoid Rachel, rushed forward with tears in her eyes. Rachel, I'm so sorry. We were wrong. So wrong. She hugged Rachel tightly, then knelt to embrace Emily. Pastor Daniels stood at the pulpit, his warm smile reaching his eyes. Let us welcome back our sister in Christ, whose courage has shown us what it truly means to live with faith. Rachel felt tears welling up as more church members approached. Sarah Miller, clutching her own young daughter's hand, spoke through sobs. When I heard what happened, how you fought to protect Emily, I realized we left you to face this alone. Please forgive us. The crowd parted as Betty Anderson, the church council president, made her way forward. She had been one of the most vocal critics, concerned about the church's reputation. Now she stood before Rachel, her usual stern expression softened with remorse. Rachel, Betty began, her voice wavering. The council met yesterday. We want to sponsor a women's self-defense program here at the church. Would you consider leading it? Emily bounced excitedly. See, Mommy? Just like you said, helping others be strong. Rachel's vision blurred with tears as she nodded. I'd be honored. Pastor Daniels produced a sign-up sheet that had already been prepared. We thought you might say yes, he said with a knowing smile. Women began lining up to add their names. Young mothers with children, Emily's age, teenagers with their grandmothers, singles and married women alike. Each signature represented a bridge being rebuilt, a community coming together. Mary Chen, who had barely spoken 2 words to Rachel before, approached with her twin daughters. My girls haven't stopped talking about how Emily stood up to that bully at school. They said she was brave, but didn't hurt anyone. Just stood her ground. That's the kind of strength we need to teach. As the service began, Rachel sat in her usual pew, but this time she wasn't alone. Women who had once avoided her now sat close by, offering tissues and gentle pats on the shoulder. Emily beamed beside her, proudly showing her charm bracelet, now a symbol of cleverness and courage, to the other children. During his sermon, Pastor Daniels spoke about the power of community and faith. Sometimes God's greatest lessons come through our hardest trials, he said, meeting Rachel's eyes. And sometimes our greatest strength is found not in standing alone, but in lifting each other up. After the service, Rachel stood in the fellowship hall, surrounded by people eager to help with the new program. Ms. Torres, her jiu-jitsu instructor, had already agreed to partner with the church. Women clustered around a table where sign-up sheets quickly filled with names. We're thinking of adding a children's class too, Betty announced. "Emily's shown us how important it is to empower our young ones." Rachel watched as Emily demonstrated a simple defensive stance to a group of fascinated kids, their parents looking on with approval instead of fear. The sight brought fresh tears to her eyes, happy ones this time. Looking around the crowded fellowship hall, Rachel saw no trace of the division that had once cut through this congregation like a knife. Instead, she saw unity. Women who had once judged her now stood shoulder to shoulder, ready to learn and grow stronger together. Men who had dismissed her concerns now supported their wives and daughters signing up for classes. Where there had been whispers, there was now open conversation. Where there had been fear, there was now determination. Where there had been isolation, there was now community. Pastor Daniel stepped up beside her, watching the scene with satisfaction. "Your courage didn't just save Emily," he said quietly. "It's saving all of us from our own fears and prejudices." Rachel gazed out over the congregation. Her congregation. These weren't just familiar faces anymore. They were partners in something bigger than themselves. Each person in this room had been transformed by recent events, learning hard but valuable lessons about judgment, support, and true Christian community. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the scene with a warm, golden light. Rachel saw not the fractured community of before, but a unified body of believers, standing together in faith and purpose. The dojo buzzed with excitement as parents and students gathered for the belt testing ceremony. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, warming the blue practice mats where Emily stood with her fellow students. Rachel sat cross-legged along the wall with other parents, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Emily's small frame looked even tinier in her crisp white guy, the fabric still stiff from newness. Her brown hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her face wore an expression of pure concentration that made her look so much older than her 10 years. Ms. Torres, their instructor, stood at the front of the room, her black belt tied precisely around her waist. "Today marks an important milestone for our newest students," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the dojo. "They've shown dedication, perseverance, and most importantly, the spirit of a true martial artist." Rachel's mind drifted back to their first day, just weeks ago. Emily had hidden behind her legs, peering nervously around the dojo. Rachel herself had been trembling, though she'd tried hard not to show it. The memory of the stalker's threat was still fresh then, making every shadow seem dangerous. Now, watching Emily move through her forms with growing confidence, Rachel could hardly believe the transformation. Her daughter's movements were precise and controlled, each stance flowing naturally into the next. When Emily executed a perfect forward roll, popping up to her feet with a determined smile, Rachel felt her chest swell with pride. The test progressed through various techniques. Emily demonstrated her breakfalls, her face serious as she slapped the mat with proper form. She worked with a partner to show arm locks and escapes, movements they'd practiced countless times at home. Rachel remembered how they'd pushed aside the coffee table to practice, giggling together when they got tangled up. "Next," Ms. Torres called out, "demonstrate your self-defense techniques." Emily stepped forward with her partner, a girl about her age named Sarah. They bowed to each other, then began. Sarah grabbed Emily's wrist, and Emily moved smoothly through the escape technique they'd learned. It was the same movement Rachel had used that night against the Stalker, though she hadn't known its name then. Watching Emily perform it now, with such careful precision, brought tears to Rachel's eyes. Other parents clapped encouragingly as the children worked through their techniques. Rachel noticed how different the atmosphere was from those early days. Many of these same parents had once whispered behind her back at church or the grocery store. Now they sat together, united in supporting their children's growth. The final portion of the test involved breaking boards. Rachel held her breath as Emily stepped up to face her challenge. Ms. Torres held a thin wooden board at Emily's chest height. "Remember," Ms. Torres said gently, "the board isn't your enemy. It's an opportunity to show your strength." Emily nodded, her face set with determination. She took her stance, drew back her fist, and with a clear "Ki-ai" strike, broke the board cleanly in 2 pieces. The crack echoed through the dojo, followed immediately by applause. Rachel wiped away tears, as she watched Emily's face light up with joy and disbelief. Her daughter stared at the broken pieces of wood, as if she couldn't quite believe what she'd just done. "Excellent work, everyone," Ms. Torres announced. "Please, line up for your belt presentations." The students knelt in a neat row, excitement visible in their straight backs and bright eyes. One by one, Ms. Torres called them forward, exchanging their white belts for yellow ones. When it was Emily's turn, she walked forward with steady steps. "Emily Owens," Ms. Torres said warmly, "you've shown exceptional spirit these past weeks. Your dedication to learning and your ability to face challenges head-on make you a true example of what we teach here." She untied Emily's white belt and replaced it with a crisp yellow one, tying it carefully around her waist. Emily bowed deeply, then turned to face the crowd. Her eyes found Rachel's immediately, and her smile was brighter than the sun streaming through the windows. After the ceremony, Emily ran to Rachel, throwing herself into her mother's arms. "We're strong now, Mommy," she whispered, her voice full of pride and joy. Rachel held her daughter tight, feeling tears roll down her cheeks. These weren't tears of fear or sadness like so many she'd shed before. These were tears of pure joy, of pride in her daughter's incredible resilience, of gratitude for how far they'd come together. Looking at Emily's beaming face, Rachel saw not just her daughter, but a reflection of their journey, from those terrifying nights of feeling helpless and alone, through the whispers and judgment, to this moment of triumph. They had transformed their fear into strength, their isolation into community. Emily fingered her new yellow belt, her eyes shining. "Can we show Pastor Daniels tomorrow at church?" she asked excitedly. "He said he wanted to see me test." "Of course we can, sweetheart," Rachel replied, running her hand over Emily's hair. She watched as her daughter bounced off to show her belt to Sarah and the other students, her movements confident and free. Rachel remained seated on the mat, overwhelmed by emotion as she watched Emily chat animatedly with her friends. The sight of her daughter, so happy and self-assured, filled her heart to bursting. Her tears flowed freely now, each one carrying the weight of their journey and the joy of their triumph. Miss Torres sat down beside her, offering a tissue with a knowing smile. "She's quite something, your Emily," she said softly. "You both are." Rachel parked her car outside the First Methodist Church's fellowship hall, taking a deep breath before gathering her notebook and purse. The evening sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, and through the windows she could see women already gathering inside, arranging chairs in a circle. Just 3 months ago, these Wednesday night meetings had been a source of anxiety, filled with sideways glances and whispered judgments. Now, as Rachel pushed open the heavy wooden doors, warm greetings welcomed her. "Rachel, we saved you a seat," called Sarah Thompson, patting the chair next to her. Sarah, who had once been one of the most vocal critics, now wore a white beginner's gi to Jiu-Jitsu class twice a week. The room slowly filled with women of all ages. Some Rachel recognized from church, others from the neighborhood, and a few new faces she'd never seen before. Margaret, the group's longtime coordinator, stood and cleared her throat. "Ladies, we're blessed to have Rachel leading our discussion tonight about finding strength in difficult times." Margaret's eyes were kind as she gestured toward Rachel. "After everything she's been through, and how she's helped our community grow stronger, I can't think of anyone better to guide us." Rachel's cheeks warmed as she stood, smoothing her skirt. The familiar flutter of nervousness tickled her stomach, but it was different now, more like excitement than fear. "Thank you, Margaret." Rachel looked around the circle, meeting encouraging smiles. "You know, when Pastor Daniels first suggested I speak to the group, I almost said no. I was afraid of being judged, of being seen as the woman who brought trouble to our neighborhood." Several women shifted uncomfortably, remembering their own past attitudes. "But that's exactly what I want to talk about tonight. How fear can isolate us, and how faith and community can heal us." Rachel opened her notebook, though she barely needed to glance at her notes. "When I was most afraid, I learned that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about moving forward despite the fear." Linda, a young mother with twins, raised her hand. "How did you find that courage, especially being a single mom?" Rachel thought for a moment. "I remember standing at my front door that night, keys shaking in my hand, thinking no one's around to help me. That moment could have broken me. Instead, it became the moment that changed everything. She leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. I realized that while I was alone in that moment, I didn't have to stay alone. None of us do. The discussion flowed naturally, as women began sharing their own stories. Mary Beth spoke about leaving an abusive marriage. Jennifer described her battle with depression after losing her job. Each story was met with nodding heads and murmurs of understanding. What strikes me, Rachel observed, is how many of us have felt alone in our struggles. We sit in church together every Sunday, but we hide our pain behind perfect smiles. That's changing though, Sarah interjected. Look at how many of us are in the self-defense class now. My daughter says she feels safer knowing her mom can protect her. Rachel smiled, remembering Emily's proud face at jiu-jitsu practice. That's exactly it. When we support each other, we're not just stronger individually. We strengthen the whole community. A newer member, Rebecca, spoke up hesitantly. I came tonight because, well, I'm going through something difficult. I was afraid to tell anyone, but hearing all of you. The room fell silent, waiting patiently as Rebecca gathered her courage. My husband lost his job last month. We might lose our house. Rebecca's voice cracked. I've been so ashamed, trying to hide it. Before Rachel could respond, Sarah was already pulling out her phone. My brother's company is hiring. Let me get you his number. Another woman offered to watch Rebecca's kids during job interviews, while Margaret mentioned the church's emergency assistance fund. Rachel watched the scene unfold, her heart swelling. This was what community looked like. Not perfect people, but broken people helping each other become whole again. As the meeting continued, Rachel guided the conversation toward practical ways they could support one another. They discussed setting up a phone tree for emergencies, organizing meal trains for families in crisis, and expanding the self-defense program to include teenage girls. What I've learned, Rachel said as the meeting drew to a close, is that faith isn't just about believing in God. It's about believing in each other too. When we stand together, fear loses its power over us. The women lingered afterward, exchanging phone numbers and hugs. Rachel found herself surrounded by small groups, answering questions and offering encouragement. The atmosphere was electric, with possibility and connection. As Rachel gathered her things to leave, Margaret touched her arm. You've changed us, Rachel. You showed us what real strength looks like. Rachel shook her head, smiling. We changed together, that's the whole point. Driving home in the gathering dusk, Rachel felt a deep sense of contentment. The fear and isolation that had once threatened to overwhelm her had transformed into something beautiful, a mission to ensure no one in their community ever had to face their battles alone. She thought about Emily waiting at home, probably practicing her jiu-jitsu moves in the living room. Her daughter had shown her that sometimes the greatest act of courage was simply refusing to give up, to keep moving forward one small step at a time. The last rays of sunlight painted the sky in soft pinks and purples as Rachel turned onto her street. She was no longer the frightened woman fumbling with her keys in the dark. She was stronger now, not just because she could defend herself, but because she had learned to open her heart to others, and in doing so, had helped them open their hearts too. The late afternoon sun spilled through the kitchen windows of the Owens home, casting warm golden light across the countertops. Rachel stood at the sink, washing vegetables for dinner, while Emily carefully arranged ingredients on the counter. The radio played softly in the background, a cheerful pop song that had Emily swaying to the beat. Can I help chop the carrots, Mom? Emily asked, already reaching for the cutting board. Miss Torres says I'm really good with precise movements now. Rachel smiled, remembering how far they'd come from those first nervous days at the dojo. Of course, sweetie. Just remember to keep your fingers tucked like we practiced. Emily nodded seriously, positioning herself at the counter with the focus she'd learned in her martial arts training. Rachel watched her daughter's careful movements, pride swelling in her chest. The little girl, who had once been afraid to walk home from the bus stop, now stood tall, confidence evident in every motion. What song is this? Rachel asked as a new tune started playing. She recognized it from Emily's playlist but couldn't remember the name. Oh, this is my favorite. Emily's face lit up. She started singing along, wielding the knife in time with the music, while still maintaining perfect form with her chopping. Rachel couldn't help herself. She put down her own knife and started dancing, spinning around the kitchen island. Emily giggled, setting aside her carrots to join in. They twirled together, their laughter mixing with the music. "Remember when we used to dance like this with Dad?" Emily asked, breathless from spinning. Rachel's heart squeezed, but the memory brought warmth instead of pain. "He always said I had 2 left feet, but he danced with you anyway," Emily said, smiling. "He'd pick me up and we'd all spin until we got dizzy." "That's right," Rachel agreed, pulling Emily close for a quick hug. "And then we'd all collapse on the couch laughing." They returned to their dinner preparation, moving in easy synchronization around the kitchen. Rachel seasoned the chicken while Emily finished the vegetables. The routine felt natural now, peaceful in a way their home hadn't been for a long time. "Mom, can you teach me how to make the sauce like Grandma used to make?" Emily asked, peering into the pan where Rachel was sautéing onions. "Sure can. First, we need to let these onions get nice and soft." Rachel stepped aside, making room for Emily to stand beside her at the stove. "See how they're starting to turn clear? That's what we want." Together they added ingredients, Rachel guiding Emily's hands as they measured and stirred. The kitchen filled with warm, familiar aromas that reminded Rachel of her own childhood, of standing on a step stool beside her mother, just like Emily was doing now. When everything was ready, they set the table together. Emily insisted on using the fancy cloth napkins, carefully folding them into triangles, just like Rachel had taught her. They sat down across from each other, steam rising from their plates. "This looks amazing," Rachel said, watching Emily beam with pride at their joint creation. "You're becoming quite the chef." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, enjoying the fruits of their labor. Rachel noticed Emily pushing a piece of chicken around her plate, her brow furrowed in thought. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Rachel asked gently. Emily looked up, her eyes serious. "Do you think bad things will ever stop happening?" Rachel set down her fork, giving the question the attention it deserved. She thought about everything they'd been through, about the fear and pain, but also about the strength and love they'd discovered. "We can't stop them all," Rachel said carefully, reaching across the table to take Emily's hand. "But we can face them together. That's what makes us strong." Emily squeezed her mother's hand. "Like in Jitsu? When we learn to fall safely so we can get back up?" "Exactly like that," Rachel nodded, amazed at her daughter's wisdom. "And we're not alone anymore. We have our whole community supporting us now." "Like Pastor Daniels and Miss Torres and Sarah from church?" Emily asked, picking up her fork again. "Like all of them," Rachel confirmed. "Sometimes the bad things help us find the good people." They finished their meal, sharing stories about their day. Emily talked about her science project and the new friend she'd made at recess. Rachel told Emily about the women's group meeting and how many people had signed up for the new self-defense class. When they finished eating, they cleared the table together, falling into their familiar routine. Emily rinsed the plates while Rachel loaded the dishwasher. The kitchen radio still played softly, but now it was background music to their quiet companionship. The warmth of their evening together wrapped around them like a comfortable blanket. Rachel watched Emily carefully drying the last pot, her face scrunched in concentration, and felt profound gratitude. They had built something precious here, not just survival but true healing. Not just safety but joy. Emily put away the last dish and turned to her mother with a satisfied smile. "We make a pretty good team, don't we?" "The best team," Rachel agreed, pulling her daughter close and kissing the top of her head. The bedside lamp cast a soft glow across Rachel's bedroom as she settled against her pillows, journal in hand. The house was quiet except for the gentle hum of the ceiling fan and Emily's peaceful breathing from down the hall. Rachel ran her fingers over the worn leather cover of her journal, remembering the day she'd bought it right after the attack, when everything felt like it was falling apart. She clicked her pen and began to write, her handwriting flowing smoothly across the lined pages. "Tonight, Emily asked me if bad things would ever stop happening. I told her we can't stop them all, but we can face them together." As I write these words, I realize how far we've come from that terrifying night when I stood alone on our front steps, fumbling with my keys, while danger crept closer. Rachel paused, taking a deep breath as the memories surfaced. Her hand trembled slightly, but she pressed on. I remember the crushing weight of fear, the way it seemed to steal the air from my lungs. That night, I was completely alone, no neighbors to hear my cries, no lights in nearby windows, no one to help. But somehow, God gave me the strength to fight back. Those half-forgotten self-defense moves came back to me like muscle memory, as if they'd been waiting for the moment I needed them most. She shifted position, tucking her legs underneath her as she continued writing. The days that followed were almost harder than the attack itself. The whispers at church, the judgment in people's eyes, the awful feeling of being blamed for bringing danger to our safe community. When the after-school program was canceled, I thought I might break under the pressure of it all. How could I protect Emily when I could barely protect myself? Rachel wiped away a tear that had fallen onto the page. But then something beautiful happened. Through our darkest moments, pinpricks of light began to shine through. Pastor Daniels, standing firm in his support. The women from church who joined our self-defense classes, bridging the gap of gossip with extended hands and encouraging smiles. Ms. Torres at the dojo, teaching us that strength comes in many forms. Her pen moved faster now, the words flowing freely. I watch Emily now, and I see such incredible growth. My little girl who once hid behind me at the grocery store now stands tall and confident. She doesn't just take self-defense classes, she lives the lessons. When she stood up to that bully at school, I saw the seeds of our struggle bearing fruit in her character. Rachel paused to brush her hair back from her face, remembering, the community festival feels like a lifetime ago, though it's been only weeks. Standing there, shaking like a leaf, I somehow found the courage to speak my truth. Strength is not in standing alone, but in standing together. I meant every word, but I had no idea how soon those words would be tested. Her hand tightened around the pen as she wrote about the darkest moment. When Emily went missing, I thought my world had ended. The note under the door, "You can't fight forever," seemed like a death sentence. But even in that terrible time, I wasn't alone anymore. Pastor Daniels prayed with me, the police mobilized immediately, and the community rallied around us. My brave, clever Emily, dropping her charm bracelet as a clue, she knew we would find her. She trusted in the strength we'd built together. Rachel touched the small cross hanging around her neck, a gift from the congregation. The fight in the barn tested everything I'd learned, everything I believed in. But this time, I wasn't that frightened woman fumbling with her keys. I was a mother protecting her child, a woman who had found her strength, a person of faith who knew she wasn't alone. With God's grace and every ounce of training, we prevailed. She smiled as she wrote about the changes in their town. Now, I see something remarkable happening in our community. The Women's Self-Defense Program has brought together people who never spoke before. Former gossips have become fierce advocates. Children like Emily walk taller, knowing they have tools to protect themselves. Even the elderly ladies who once crossed the street to avoid me now stop to chat about their grandchildren joining our classes. The tears were flowing freely now, but they were tears of gratitude. What started as one terrifying night has transformed into a movement of hope. The same church that once whispered behind my back now hosts weekly support groups. Women share their stories without shame. We've created a network where everyone looks out for each other. No one walks alone at night anymore. No child is left unsupervised after school. Rachel reached the bottom of the page and turned to a fresh one. Emily asked me tonight if bad things will ever stop happening. The truth is, they won't, but what's changed is how we face them. No one was around to help me once, but now, no one in this town will ever be alone again. We've built something stronger than fear. A community of faith, courage, and unconditional support. She looked at the clock, nearly midnight. With careful movements, Rachel closed her journal and placed it on her bedside table. A peaceful smile spread across her face as she reached for the lamp switch, her heart full of gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. Morning sunlight streamed through Emily's bedroom window, painting golden patterns on her purple bedspread. Rachel stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the peaceful sight of her sleeping daughter. These quiet moments felt precious now, each one a gift after everything they'd been through. "Time to wake up, sweetheart," Rachel called softly, crossing to the window to adjust the blinds. Another beautiful day ahead. Emily stirred. Her dark curls tumbled across her pillow. She blinked sleepily, then broke into a warm smile at the sight of her mother. "Morning, Mommy." Rachel sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Emily's hair back from her forehead. "Did you sleep well?" "Uh-huh." Emily stretched and yawned. "I had good dreams." "That's wonderful." Rachel's heart swelled with love and gratitude. These simple morning routines had taken on new meaning, each one a reminder of their strength, their survival. In the kitchen, Rachel prepared breakfast while Emily got dressed. The familiar sounds of drawers opening and closing upstairs, water running in the bathroom, and Emily's footsteps padding around her room filled the house with comfortable normalcy. "Something smells good." Emily appeared in the doorway, already dressed in her favorite blue sweater and jeans, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "French toast," Rachel said, sliding a plate across the counter, "and fresh strawberries." They ate together, sharing quiet conversation about the day ahead. Emily had a science test she'd studied hard for, and Rachel had a meeting with the women's support group she now led at church. "Miss Torres says I might be ready for my next belt soon," Emily mentioned between bites, referring to their jujitsu instructor. Rachel nodded proudly. "You've worked so hard. I've watched you get stronger every day." After breakfast, they gathered their things for the day ahead. Rachel helped Emily adjust her backpack straps, making sure everything was secure. The morning routine felt different now, more purposeful, more precious. Every detail mattered, from double-checking the locks to scanning the street before stepping outside. The spring air was crisp and sweet as they started their walk to school. Their neighbors were out too. Mrs. Chen watering her roses, Mr. Patterson walking his dog. They waved warmly to Rachel and Emily, genuine friendship, replacing the whispers and judgment of months past. Rachel held Emily's hand as they walked, their footsteps falling into an easy rhythm. The sidewalk was dappled with sunshine filtering through the oak trees that lined their street. Birds called from the branches above, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine from nearby gardens. "Remember when we used to be scared to walk to school?" Emily asked suddenly, looking up at her mother with clear, honest eyes. Rachel squeezed her daughter's hand. "I remember, sweetheart. But we're not scared anymore, are we?" Emily shook her head firmly. "Nope, because we're strong now. And we have friends everywhere." She was right. Rachel looked around at their neighborhood, at Mrs. Chen, who now attended their self-defense classes, at Mr. Patterson, who had organized a neighborhood watch program, at the other parents walking their children to school, all of them watching out for each other now. They passed the spot where Emily had dropped her charm bracelet, that terrible day, her clever signal for help. The memory no longer brought panic, only pride in her daughter's quick thinking and bravery. The school came into view, its brick buildings warm in the morning sun. Other children were arriving, their voices carrying across the playground. Parents chatted in small groups near the gate, several of them smiling and waving at Rachel. Emily slowed her steps as they approached the school entrance. She turned to face her mother, her expression suddenly serious. Looking up with eyes full of love and admiration, she squeezed Rachel's hand. "You're my hero, Mommy," she said simply, the words carrying all the weight of their shared journey. Rachel felt tears welling up, but they were tears of joy and gratitude. She knelt down to Emily's level, looking into her daughter's beautiful face so full of strength and hope. "And you're mine," Rachel replied, softly, her voice thick with emotion. She pulled Emily into a tight hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. When they pulled apart, both their eyes were shining. Rachel straightened Emily's sweater and touched her cheek gently. "Have a wonderful day at school, sweetheart. I'll see you this afternoon." "Love you, Mom," Emily said, then turned and walked confidently through the school gates, joining a group of friends who welcomed her with bright smiles. Rachel watched her daughter go, her heart full to bursting. The morning sun warmed her face as she began walking back home, each step feeling light and purposeful. The world around her seemed to glow with possibility, the trees greener, the sky bluer, the air sweeter than before. Their street stretched before them, familiar and welcoming. Rachel felt an unshakable faith in the future, not because she believed nothing bad would ever happen again, but because she knew they had the strength to face whatever came their way. Together, they had transformed fear into courage, isolation into community, and darkness into light. They walked down the street together, mother and daughter, their shadows stretching long in the morning sun. The world ahead was bright and full of promise, each step carrying them forward into a future they had fought for, and one not just for themselves, but for their entire community. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Rachel Owens, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.